You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Alternative Talk, AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to The Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, September 30th show. I am committed to providing you knowledge needed to be successful in every area of your finances. Knowledge is power, and that's what you'll receive by listening to the show. If you're hearing my show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast. You can always call the show at 1-855-400-1150 or go online at themoneyhour.com to ask any questions of the guests that I have in studio today. And right now I'll have a conversation with Vincent Humphrey, attorney at law with Humphrey Associates, and we're talking about divorcing and how that can affect your property. Vincent, thank you so much for coming back in studio.
Tina, always a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. So a little bit about Vincent. Vincent Humphrey, again, attorney at law with Humphrey Associates PLLC, which focuses on family law and civil litigation. His passion is bringing justice and clarity to those in need. His experience allows him to work well in many different situations, and his service first mentally allows him to break past the toughest scenarios. Vincent holds a Juris Doctor degree from the University Idaho College of Law and a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Washington. He has advised executives from Fortune 100 companies as well as the working man and woman at the local grocery store. So he works with them all. Vincent participates in various legal organizations in King County where he mentors other lawyers and is interested in helping good people going through tough situations. And it kind of sounds like a little bit of a passion behind what you do. And I really love that. Good people that are going through difficult situations is a great thing to be able to do, Vincent. And really today we're talking about the unfortunate situation of going through a divorce, as we know that there are many good people going through that bad situation. And being this is about money, talking a lot about real estate, bringing in how that's going regarding your property is a topic that I wanted to go over. So Vincent, can you explain to my listeners what community property means?
Yeah, I could give the legal definition from the RCW, but I don't want anybody to go to sleep today.
Your description, your definition.
Yeah. And just as a precursor, I know I said I'm thankful to be here, but I just want everybody to know that's listening that Tina, you're wonderful. Tina, just quick plug for her. She wrote a book and she actually allowed me to have a copy of that, and I actually just finished it. And so I hadn't had an opportunity to see her since then. But for those of you that don't know who she is, she's an amazing person. She's not paying me to say this, but I'm saying she's an amazing person, and I hold her in that much high regard. So I just wanted to say that at the outset that, Tina, I'm so happy to be here and see you and know a little bit more about your backstory. And for those of you that don't know about that, you definitely should check that out. It'll give you a better perspective as to who she is and why she does what she does. But enough of that. Community property, right? That's the question.
Community
property. A couple of years back, I was just looking through just some of our archives at our office, and this is a situation that comes up very frequently. And so I remember we did a show I think literally about 2 years ago, talking about community property and money, and it is something that comes up consistently with our clients, and I think it's one of those things that will help a lot of people. So if you're listening and you're in that situation, pay attention here. So going through the divorce process, one of the things to know in Washington State is that there's really 3 different frames, if you will, of how property is looked at. And when I say property, we're meaning obviously your tangible property, such as a house, but also other soft assets, stocks, or other bonds, or other sort of assets that are appreciating in value. So like I said, I won't define it, but in our RCW, it defines it as things that you have that have been acquired since the date of I do. So a lot of times for my clients, I tell them that when you said I do, that opened up this new category called community property. So people going through a divorce, a lot of them know that. They say, well, yeah, it's 50-50, right? And that's within the marital community. So think of it from the point when you said I do to, well, I don't.
Yes, makes sense.
But between those two statements there, everything that you have acquired in assets as well as liabilities, and I think that's another thing that people should be aware of, that it's not just the appreciable assets, right? If you've got a spending problem, or we've got a it's unfortunate, but a lot of people make $1 and spend $5.
Yes,
well, in
yeah.
that scenario, understanding that however you have leveraged yourself, credit cards, second mortgage, third, fourth, I don't know how far you can go down that route, but if you're leveraged to the hilt, understanding that that is also community property, and that extends to everything from pensions, 401ks, IRAs. I call that the marriage tax. When it gets to that point where we say, I don't, the first question to know is, well, when did you acquire this? Was that after I do, or did you have something from before I do, or after I don't? And we can talk about that here.
A very good description there, Vincent. And when it comes to mortgages with FHA, because Washington is a community property state, and so FHA looks at, and this is a little shout out because I actually talked about FHA for the appraisal process. If you're going on an FHA loan, they do look at it as a community property state, and so everything that was acquired, you have to qualify for both of the debts on that. So yes, you're taking on those liabilities. So Vincent, what about separate property? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that a lot of people don't know or not aware of. Everybody kind of focuses on, it's community property state, 50-50, that's kind of the end of it. And it's not true. There's, especially for those that maybe are in their second or third marriage or just waited until maybe, let's say, 30, 40s, 50s, 60s, or beyond. Good for you if you're in that beyond category. But in that situation, everything that you have from before marriage is what we are considering separate property, and that's defined in our statute. For those of you that want to Google it, it's RCW 26.16.010, and that defines separate property. And in kind of my take on that, think of it as property that you had prior to that statement, I do. So what you came into the marriage with, so if you said, look, in my IRA, I had, X amount of dollars, it still is your money. Even though you're married now, that is not subject to, there's always exceptions. And so, I'll put that as a qualifier that, yes, there are exceptions where you can convert money or assets from before marriage into making them community. But simply speaking, if you are able to keep that separate, that is your separate account, you have the statements or other documents to show that it is, in fact, property that you had prior to marriage, that will be looked at differently. So money that you have in that context is separate and is yours.
So then anything that is yours before marriage, can it be considered community property or no?
It can be. And that's one of those things where if you, what we call commingle. So you had an account and it had some money in it, and then you guys bought a house, but you couldn't show the paper trail, and you kind of put it all in the pot together, in the community pot, and then you were buying groceries from there, and then you were adding improvements to your home, and you're not able to show how that money was derived, it can lose its what we call character. It can lose that tag of separate property. So one of the things that is very prudent to do is to make sure that you keep your documents, be able to show that, yes, I had this account, it had this amount of money, I transferred this amount of money to this account, from that account, I bought this, so that way you can show the court. So a lot of people that, even if they are aware that they have separate property, they don't keep a good paper trail. And when you get to the court, judicial officers are not CPAs. They're not financial accountants. And if they can't make a determination as to where did that come from, it will then be recharacterized.
So just like in the mortgage world, the popular term, not a popular fun term, but paper trail. Everything has to be paper trail and documented. So getting back to debt, so assets, it makes sense in that. Let's talk about debts, because I mentioned FHA and financing. If you can show that the debts were in your name only and they were before the marriage, then they're not used against qualifying if that other spouse is on the loan himself or herself. It's only if they're on it together, but anything that was purchased at the time or that they took out at the time is both of theirs. So what about when it comes to the law about debts that were acquired prior to getting married?
Very similar. And so debts that are acquired prior to marriage, just like assets, would be considered your separate liability. So for the millennials, that comes in a lot of times with student loan debt to say, well, we got married, but I had this student loan. That doesn't all of a sudden become the debt of your spouse. Now, if you continue on your studies after you say, I do, to the extent that you are matriculating past that point, yes, then that could be considered some sort of community debt. There's still other arguments there because, you're not going to school on behalf of the other person. But still, simply put, understanding that debts that you have prior to marriage will continue to be your separate obligation. So that's something to know. And that's where, I know this isn't the topic of this show, but prenuptial agreements, that's where that talk comes in, because what that does is it defines very clearly who has what, from their debts to their assets, so that in the event that it doesn't work out, and there's statistics, I won't spout those now, in regards to chances of success or a marriage that ends at the time of death or something along those lines. So understanding that prenuptial agreements come and they help these conversations.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about the divide of real estate, because I have a lot of clients that come to me when they're going through a divorce, and some are selling the property so that they can get the cash that they need to pay out the spouse, and the others not. So how does that work? How are they going to divide that property?
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm sure you see this too, Tina, that a lot of couples, what they do, they have one spouse, maybe that's the earner, and one that kind of maintains the house, or maybe doesn't earn as much, and maybe is unaware of all of the finances and how things are divided out. And to that, I say that the court is very cold. It's pretty, we'll say it's kind of black and white in regards to, well, if somebody is entitled to half the equity in the house, it doesn't matter, right, that if you're trying to keep it, you're trying to take your check and you're trying to balance out all of the bills. Simply put, on paper, that half is theirs. So to the extent that somebody wants to keep a house and the other party or the other person, spouse, says, I want to sell it, I just want my money, if you can pay, if you have the cash available, you can do that. You can buy them out, and then you would have to refinance to get them out of the mortgage and those sort of obligations. And so that's another thing to know as well, that just because you've done that, or maybe even, let's say there's a quit claim deed that's involved, that doesn't mean when there is a mortgage involved that you are released from your liability. That takes an extra step. And a lot of attorneys, they don't do that. They just say, oh, sign a quit claim, you don't have any interest, but that doesn't get whoever your holder is out of the picture, because they can still come after you. Yeah.
So let's talk about that extravagant gift. Brand new Ferrari, and it was specifically given at a 5-year anniversary. So obviously it was a gift. How does that come into play?
First of all, wow.
I know myself. My husband hasn't given me that extravagant gift.
I was going to say, I want to go for a ride. I'm a Lambo guy, but we'll go for a ride. The thing to know there is to, again, ask that question. Is this from before marriage? When did you get that? I'm assuming in this context that maybe it was during marriage. And so with that, then the next question is, well, did they do it outright? Or is there a debt on that? Because they said, oh, here it is for you. I've financed it. Well, did we just create a debt there? So that's another question when somebody's giving extravagant gifts from, oh, here's a nice Rolex, or here's some Manolo Blahniks, or here's a nice trip out just for you. Did you pay for that, and how did you pay for that? Where did that money come from? Was that my money? Did you take out another mortgage to give me this Ferrari? Thank you, but not really. So
gift, the idea that it's a gift, it doesn't matter. It's still
it could still be considered community property or community debt. So let's just take another assumption and assume that it was separate cash and they paid for it outright. Typically, a gift is a gift, and where you will see this more, I guess more realistically than the Ferrari, is the wedding ring. When things go bad and they say, that Tiffany solitaire, that's 7 carats. Well, what happens with that? Well, a lot of times that was given before marriage. So now you can see that's separate property, and it was a gift.
Got it.
I mean, they can be nice, but a lot of times...
So sad for that husband situation, because usually that's where it's going to come in. So, Vince, if your spouse and yourself have a business together, a co-owned business, that seems like it get really complicated. I mean, we could probably have a whole show on that question. So how do they look at that?
Really quickly, I would say that's where you would get outside help. That's where you get a financial advisor or a planner to evaluate the business, and then to be able to assign some sort of value to both sides. So you're right, that maybe that'll be the next show, but there's a whole lot to that question.
Yeah, so it sounds like really when it comes to marriage, and really anything else when it comes to law, just making sure that you have everything protected and documented, and really understand how everything works, because nothing is guaranteed, and no exceptions there when it comes to marriage. So you just want to make sure that you're looking at the worst case scenario and understanding what that is. And if you need assistance and you've got any legal issue that's going on, really the Money Hour, what the show is all about, is setting you up with the best of the best in the industry in all aspects of protecting your money so that you can have protect your family. So I encourage for you to call the show and connect with Vincent. And Vincent, thank you so much for coming back in studio.
Truly a pleasure. I look forward to that lunch and coffee.
Likewise. Thank you. And coming up next in the Money Hour, are you suffering with headaches, migraines, attention, or concentration? These can be linked to visual perception problems. And I have Terry Carlson with Erland Services Northwest right here on 1150 AM KKNW after this short break.